Hello, friends, followers, and fellow realtors. Welcome to the Waves podcast created by the Highland Lakes Association of Realtors. My name is Matthew Butter, and I will be your host today. We designed this podcast for realtors to help innovate, educate, and elevate their real estate practice, one ripple at a time. Our goal is to help navigate the waves of the industry and dive into local trends, topics, and beyond by interviewing experts that add value to our mission. Think of us as your proverbial life jacket to keep you afloat in these crazy times. We hope to make a splash in your day. Hello and welcome. This is our second episode of the Waves podcast, sponsored by the Highland Lakes Realtor Board here in Marble Falls, Texas. We just had a wonderful luncheon with Gerald Klassen from the Texas A&M Research Center. He's shared a lot of great data with our members that were able to attend. Those of you that did not, make sure you're here next time. But if you weren't, today we're going to go over briefly a little bit of the data he shared. We had a nice lunch sponsored by Concierge Title. It was an amazing event. About 70 people showed up. And we're now here to talk with Gerald about, first of all, who is this guy that helps us with all this data? Tell us about your story. You just mentioned when we were talking off camera that you're originally from Canada, from Vancouver. Tell us about growing up in Canada, and how did you get to the States?
It was a cold, wet childhood in Vancouver on the left coast, and as soon as I graduated from university, I decided to head to sunny, warmer climate in Texas. And so in 1991, I came down to the hill country in Texas and have bounced around here for a number of years. I love the hill country. I love this area. We used to come up to Lake LBJ back many a year ago, and so.
So did you graduate University of Vancouver before you came?
I did. I graduated from Simon Fraser University. The Fighting Klansmen at the time. That's in the Scottish tradition. In the Scottish tradition. Yeah, and we had our Beefeater band, and Beefeaters were the name of the band. And
were you in the band?
No, not in the band. Okay. Played saxophone, but not in the band.
Hey, I played saxophone too. Which one, tenor or alto?
Alto.
Okay, I was tenor.
All right,
cool.
Yeah,
we have a
did that, and then not long after I came to Texas, I went to the University of Texas San Antonio and did my MBA there.
The Roadrunners.
The Roadrunners, that's right. And then at the end, in 2006, I decided I hadn't had enough school, so I went to Texas A&M University and did their master's in land economics and real estate. That's how I learned about the center.
Okay.
I did some work for them, internship, and that's when they called me to come back and work at the center. Then I came back to start building databases and data warehouses for housing
That's where
statistics.
you are right now.
And that's where I am right now.
So your MBA at UTSA, let's go back a little
Sure.
bit. What was that in?
Management information systems.
Okay.
So it was
MIS
managing technology and all the things that go about developing good systems.
And then you went to A&M. So is there any kind of conflict there? University of
I don't
Texas,
know. I usually I'll punt on that one, and I'll go back to my SFU roots and remain
smart move considering
remain
the Longhorns
neutral.
are going to be in the SEC. Now I know UTSA has its own football team, so they're separate, but still part of the same system, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Thank you for sharing that. Give us a little background. Now you also were in investments.
Yes,
in the investment community before you got into real estate and data warehousing?
Yes, part of that. So I worked at USA for a while for the investment management company. But then I went out to a company in Los Angeles called Metropolitan West Securities, and we were a major source of financing for the warehouse lending facilities for the private label mortgage-backed securities. So if you think about back then, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, they all needed to get short-term financing for those wholesale funding facilities, and we happened to be a major cash lender, and so we did a lot of business lending billions of dollars to them to fund the activities that they were doing in private label mortgage-backed securities.
Wow. Was that before 2008?
That was from 2002 to 2008. So I had a front row seat to
The Big Short.
The Big Short.
That's a movie out there. If you haven't seen it, it's a great movie.
It's great. That one and Margin Call are my two favorite movies. But most people don't know, but the prices actually started to take root in the summer of 2007. But you never heard about it in the mainstream media. But there started to be funding problems, and we started raising. Fed raised their Fed funds rate, so we raised the rate we were charging, for that short-term funding, and it started breaking down in the spring of 2008, and that's when we were part of the cash run on Bear Stearns. Wow. And then once more in September when we were part of the cash run on Lehman Brothers. So it was a front row seat to what happened back then.
And then in 2008,
2008, they gave me a call from the center and said, hey, we'd love for you to come develop a data warehouse. And so I thought, hey, that'd be a great. And about a month after I left Wachovia, Global Securities Lending, they failed. So I like to think it's because I left Wachovia that they failed.
They didn't have you at the helm.
They didn't. I wasn't there, but
inquired of your expert opinion.
Yeah, it was quite the experience, and a lot of things went on behind the scenes that didn't come out in the mainstream.
Right.
And I have a feeling right now
That's
there's a lot
again?
of things going. I see a lot of things happening behind the scenes that I think eventually are going to come out into the mainstream. So we shall see.
That seems to be correct historically too. If you look at other parts of the world and other parts of our lives, things are sometimes hidden and then they all come out to light.
There you go.
Well, we're so glad to have you here. I wore my George Strait shirt because he sold out Kyle Field at Texas A&M last Saturday. Broke the record, 110,095 people. Our own Sally McBride was there, and several of my friends were there. Also, I wore to honor him since we're talking about Texas A&M and the Research Center. Sorry, Longhorns. But we have to realize and recognize that the data warehouse and your department, the Research Center, is there. I was in IT sales, and we talked about data lakes and trying to amalgamate data. And just to let you know, sometimes I can be a little bit left-brained, not just always creative right-brained. And so I enjoy talking nerdy, if you will. And so we're going to talk a little bit nerdy with data, but try to break it down and make it more digestible to everyone out there that maybe doesn't align with numbers as well. So we're going to talk through some numbers. Tell us a little bit more about how working in the financial sector helped prepare you for what you do now at the Research Center.
It gave me a great appreciation for the different approaches to finance, to financing a house, right? The understanding the role of financial markets in funding adjustable rate mortgages and the importance of short-term funding in the market is something that I really appreciate. One of the really significant lessons I learned is that when the Federal Reserve has a very consistent monetary policy of holding short-term rates low, it enables investors, household buyers, it gives them a great level of comfort that those rates will remain low for a long period of time. But when monetary policy changes and rates start rising, it starts impacting the people, the households, the businesses, all
and
the
a lot of people don't understand it.
Don't understand
they don't dive deep into
impact
metrics
of changes in monetary policy on the owners of real estate and the different financing strategies that they've employed, whether it's short-term or long. Right now, the residential households were locked in at low 30-year rates. So this problem of rising short-term rates, they get a pass on it. But it's the commercial borrowers, it's the businesses that funded long-term investments with 3-year adjustable rate or 5-year adjustable rate
and I want to
that are going to be the subject of this difficulty that we're in right now. So it really taught me the relationship between monetary policy, financing assumptions of real estate, and the ultimate impact on values of real estate.
That's good. Thanks for sharing. Is Milton Friedman going to come up in this conversation maybe a little bit?
Well, money inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon of when too much money gets created. Right. So he's right on, has a 1,000%.
And if you don't know who that is, just Google him. You find him on Wikipedia or somewhere else. Thank you for sharing that. I want to talk a little bit more as we transition. We're going to kind of do this in two parts. First part, we're going to talk about the center. A lot of people go, okay, research center, data warehouse. What's a data warehouse? Well, think about a storage unit that you store stuff in. By the way, my latest single stuff just came out today on all streaming platforms. Got to give myself a little bit of a promo there. But you store things in a warehouse.
Right.
And sometimes it's filed very succinctly, and sometimes it's all over the place, depending on diversity.
No, always succinctly and organized.
Always succinctly and
Always
organized.
succinctly and well organized.
Just the way you present yourself and you talk, I know that's how your data comes across. We don't want dirty data, right?
No dirty data.
No dirty data.
We want...
So a data warehouse collects data. Where do you get this particular information from?
So I get the data from all of the MLS systems in Texas. And so it gives me all of the data pertaining to all of the areas in Texas. And so that data, the data warehouse is really a great tool for helping to bring a centralized, complete picture to what's going on in the market. There are a lot of parts in the state where there's overlap, and some boards may have a lot, some of the data, some boards may have other of the data, and so by bringing it all together into a single data warehouse, we can provide a complete picture in every area, neighborhoods, zip codes, counties, a complete picture of what the data says for a particular geography. And that's really an important part of this.
So when I look at our MLS, sometimes when I'm pulling comparisons, comps, if you will, I look at sold data for a particular single-family residential condo or home. Is there data out there or data sources that are outside of MLS that doesn't get reported to MLS, but you find through the property tax roll or something else that maybe the board doesn't have access to?
Property tax data is different than transaction data. So we don't, the data that we have on new home sales does not come directly from builders. We don't. Our data source for housing reporting is strictly from the MLS data.
It's only from that?
Only from the MLS
That's good
data.
Clarification. Thank you.
Yes.
That's good to know, because I was a little confused when I was listening to the presentation earlier, and I was wondering if there were other sources, because we know that a lot of stuff gets sold off market, if you will.
Right.
And not necessarily it's not illegal, but it's something that we see happening, and so we can't report on what those ranch transactions look like to give comparisons, because there's not much to pull from. And so what about builders? You talked about that.
Yeah, so of course, builders sell, the biggest share of new home sales is negotiated directly between the builder and the buyer. We don't get that data. But one thing I've noticed particularly in certain areas of the state, is ever since COVID, there was a huge surge in new homes being marketed through the MLS. So by builders. And so there was definitely an increase in the influence of new home sales in the MLS that has happened since COVID. And so I don't know if that will remain going into the future, but so we definitely have.
Because before they would have someone on site, they have a new residential community, they would be their sales agent, and people just see the signs and go check it out. But now what you're saying is they're actually marketing on the MLS.
Right, but that was more in the outlying areas. What we did find when I took a look at it, particularly in the Austin area, is that in the infill communities, infill neighborhoods being developed by a new builder, quite often there was a higher percentage of homes sold through the MLS because they didn't have a sales office or large banners along the road. So
is that indicative of smaller building companies?
Smaller communities, right? They don't have the large marketing centers that these outlying subdivisions and neighborhoods have. And so where you can drive down the road and see the big signs. When you've got smaller infill communities being built, then what I saw there was a tendency for more of those, not all the units, but more dependency on the MLS to do the marketing push of that effort.
And what we're talking about here, folks, correct me if I'm wrong, you have someone like Santa Rita Ranch, which is over north of Leander. and so Liberty Hill area, which they have a huge marketing push, commercials, banners, billboards. You have large builders across the nation like Pulte Homes and several D.R. Horton. So those guys, they've got big marketing budgets. They've got their sales centers.
Right.
But people that develop the ranches at Delaware Springs and Burnett, that was a local builder who built those homes, and you're talking 25 homes. Now they're expanding it. So you're seeing more of those type of builders.
They'll put a small number into the MLS to draw marketing attention to it, and then people will become aware, oh, it's there. And so there's definitely value for builders, particularly of small communities, to market it through the MLS when they don't have the big sales offices.
So the data you receive doesn't necessarily reflect those numbers unless they're selling through the MLS.
Right.
And so when you get the data into the data warehouse,
one thing I want to touch on, what we've found is that those new homes being marketed through MLS tend to be more representative of spec-built homes, as opposed to the custom that have a lot more features. So when I look at MLS, new homes listed in the MLS, they tend to be a little more representative of the spec market than of the high, truly very customized homes.
And just to clarify, because something I learned along my journey, speculative home builds are ones where investors, builders build a home how they want it. No one's telling them to pick out the granite countertops or how many square feet, because that's a custom home. Speculative home, you take that build and you build it and you hope somebody buys it.
Right.
Like it's a risk. It's speculative. And then you have the bigger builders that build tract homes, which is, we have 10 to 15 units that all have the same floor plan, like your Lennars, your D.R. Hortons, your Pultes, and they go into these different areas. Thanks for clarifying that. So when it comes into the data, what is your process and what does your team look like to help filter through that? How long does it take once you receive the data? Month-to-month basis?
It takes me about a week to go through and to fully audit and take a preliminary look at the data to make sure it's accurate. I have almost a countless number of audits that I put the data through. A couple examples: the home that listed for $270,000 and sold for $2.7 million. Right.
That's an outlier.
That's an outlier. That's I would love to be that guy that sold that house, but that's probably a fat finger. Well. Right. I'm gonna count that in sales, but I'm not gonna put that into my median or average price calculation, right? So that's an audit. Or, for example, the $800,000 condo in Houston that had only 1 square foot, right? Probably it had a few more square foot, but so it does a whale of a number.
Do you put everything into like an algorithm or a software program?
I guess I call it early artificial intelligence. I got to jump. Yes, sir. I just just from working with the data and seeing how the different data entry patterns, projecting what sales are going to be. I monitor data entry patterns for all the different areas of the state, so I know who gets their data in on time and who doesn't. And so,
do you have a cutoff?
No, we'll make adjustments for what those for the late data entry, because the goal of our data is to produce the most accurate data possible on a timely basis. Our researchers and market people don't want to wait 2 or 3 months for all the sales to get in. And so we'll work with it to create something that is as accurate as possible, as close to that month end, and so we've done, I think, a very good job. I've responded to many inquiries. Why is our data different than what's in the MLS system? And we're always able to reconcile and figure, well, your MLS was missing these sales, or the actual close date on these sales, or these sales didn't come in until after month end. So there's a lot of work that goes into the quality assurance to make sure we're producing the highest quality of data for the folks using the data.
And so you developed this software, processes and systems
Right.
around it. You have all that. You have everything together.
Yeah.
Then you put it in Market Viewer. Can you tell us what Market Viewer is?
So Market Viewer is a free, emphasize that,
Grazie.
benefit to members of the Texas Realtors. They can access it on the Texas Realtors website in the member resources using their TR login. But once a month, I will upload that data from our data warehouse, and the folks at Texas Realtors do a great job on that portal to build that portal and add features and build it out. And they will take that data, load it into Market Viewer, and then it's available to the leadership of the boards, usually I think it's about the 9th through the 10th after month end. And to the general membership, it becomes available on the 15th of the month. And then all of the reports and dashboards and everything is available. The licensees in the state of Texas, a portion of their license goes to fund the center. And so there is no charge for Market Viewer.
That's awesome.
We don't sell it back to support ourselves. All the folks who are licensed to transact in real estate enjoy that.
I absolutely love it. I love the content that my board puts out that I can share with my clients and share on my social media posts. I'll take the data from Burnett County, Llano County, and it's an easy way to look at. It's a graphic illustration of the data, so it's not ones and zeros and there's some different graphing there, but it's real easy to look at, to interface with, to digest, and it's easier. It's also, we talked about this today. You realtors out there can take this and brand it to make it your own. You can put your logo on it. You can put your picture on it, just like you do when you say, my contract is that title, or this house just sold, and you put your picture on there, your mugshot right there with the price and everything, and you can market it to everyone that you interact with on social media, your email list, text it to them. I love it. I've done that since I've been a member here, because I put on my stories on Instagram and Facebook. I share it through text, through email, and I think it's a valuable service that's, again, free. Now, someone said, well, there's no such thing as a free lunch. You just mentioned that part of our fees go toward it. Yes, it does. But you can dive into this data even more than what the board provides for us. So thank you for sharing that. Now we're going to dive into our local market as well as the general U.S. market, housing, inflation. You went through a lot of numbers, a lot of slides earlier during our luncheon today. We're not going to get to go through all of that again, as much as I'm passionate about many of the stats that I saw. I want to touch on a few things that I think people find interesting, especially in this area. Since 2014, Burnett County has seen an increased population of 22%. I believe that's what you said.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
22.8% growth since 2014. That's an extra 10,000 people have moved to Burnett County since
So that's
2014.
1,000 per year on average.
Well, yeah, I guess about that, yeah.
And then Llano County, 16.3% is what I wrote down.
Yeah.
Can you tell me where those people are coming from? Do you have that data?
I don't have that data. It's just looking at the population data, which is available on our website down to the county level. The IRS does have some data, but I don't believe it goes down that far. But
if you were to speculate, I know you're
if I were to where they were
statistics guy, but
where they were coming from, I think when I was looking at our migration data that happened, we've got a great migration data set, and looking in the Austin area, the majority of the migration was intra-MSA moves or in from other parts of the state into
what does
Austin.
MSA mean?
metropolitan statistical area.
Okay.
So it's the 5-county area. My guess, I guess the short answer is a lot of it is in-state moves.
So people that have already in the state of Texas, they're retiring, they're coming out to
get
the
out
lake.
here. They've heard about, they're familiar with the hill country, and they've probably been here once or twice.
Right.
And
like
decided, hey, let's go stay down at the lake there, or maybe they had childhood, memories from down here and came and gave it another look. But my sense is that a lot of those folks came from in the state.
I agree with you, because you said also in Llano County, 76% of the people did not move anywhere else. They weren't, or I believe that's the
well, there was the folks there was a high 76 moving inbound, but the folks who moved within Llano County was very small.
Very small.
It was either people moving in or a small number of people moving out. And
which is less than 30%.
So yeah.
Less than 30%. Once they get here, they stay. They want to plant roots because they know this is their forever home. When it comes to after retirement, so Burnett County was a little different. We saw that folks were maybe you can share that data as far as how many stay or move within the county.
When we were looking at the proportion, so the inbound moves, it's been a stable upward move actually since the 2000s, and right now in 2023 our data shows that 51.9% were inbound moves, so from outside of the area. Could have been within the state, could have been from other areas of the state or out of state. I haven't got the numbers broken down that detail, whether they were in state or out of state, but the outbound moves were 41% and the intra-county moves were 7%.
Okay.
So a small number of people moving, but proportionally, the largest proportion were folks coming in from the outside, which is reflected in the population numbers, the growth of the population.
What does that mean for us realtors? That means get excited. There's opportunities, they abound. Don't worry about what you're hearing in the news on social media or your crazy uncle with conspiracy theories, okay? We've got opportunity. People are buying and selling. We did 160 transactions in May alone in both Burnett and Llano counties. That's total. While we have a lot of inventory, we talked about inventory, and when you brought up that slide, 12 months in both counties.
Well, 10 months in Burnett County, 10 months inventory in Burnett County, 12 months inventory in Llano County, and a lot of that growth to get from a more balanced market has happened since the start of the year.
And you said the state overall is 4 points.
So the state overall in May just hit 4.3 months of inventory.
4.3 months inventory.
We haven't seen that level of inventory in the state
right?
since August of 2013. So I know there's a lot of stories about inventory shortages, but what I've seen, and that may be true in certain areas, no question, but
I also think that this area, tell me, this is my theory, this is Butter's world here. We're in a lake resort area, a lot of second homes. So obviously in Llano County alone, we're going to see more inventory on that factor variable alone than a DFW where it's a primary residence. You got Tarrant County and Dallas and Fort Worth. I've heard of COVID-like situations where people are on top of one another trying to get a property because they're moving in because their corporate headquarters just relocated. We've had a lot of relocation of corporate headquarters from California, New York, other states to Texas. And so in those areas that you have, I call it the concrete jungle, no offense to my friends at DFW, but a lot of them like to come over here to Fredericksburg and to Marble Falls and Horseshoe Bay because they want to get away from the craziness. I was just dropping off some friends at the airport the other day, and the traffic and the construction, it's a lot to handle. And so in those markets, you may see the inventory being lower, more around that state average than we do here because we're in a bubble. Let's just be honest.
I think
it's a good one though.
Yeah, and I think one thing in a market like this, which has so many folks with second homes, or vacation homes, or homes that they bought, back in COVID, that folks can have short-term financing obligations where they are in other parts of the state and other parts of the country. And what we've seen, going back to a little bit what I talked about at the beginning, if they had done some kind of short-term financing on that property, like an adjustable rate mortgage, as a second, it's a second home. Probably they're not going to put a 30-year mortgage on it. They may not. They may put a short-term mortgage on it, or conversely, wherever they are, they may have done some kind of a 3-year mortgage on an investment property that they had, or whatever, some kind of other asset. And now that the short-term rates are higher, they're facing a reset, and they need cash. And so the second home that's going to get listed for sale to raise the cash to handle financial obligations on resetting short-term debt elsewhere. So I think it was a tremendous boom for folks to come and buy second homes and vacation properties.
Oh, yeah. But now their rates are going up if they financed it.
And there's, and you talk about business owners, and it's no secret there's a lot of wealthy families that have purchased homes here that may be second homes. And if those families have commercial real estate investments elsewhere and they're facing a large reset in financing elsewhere, they may need to raise cash.
Let's talk about that real quick, because we mentioned earlier we're going to bring that back up again.
Yeah.
You were talking about how the adjustable rate mortgages are going to affect commercial more than residential.
Correct.
In this particular phase that we're in.
In this cycle, yes.
And so you had mentioned in the presentation earlier that, hey, reach out to some of these guys that have these arms, if you will, with commercial lending, because they're facing an increase in their mortgage payment, increase in insurance, so they may want it to liquidate. It may be a good opportunity for you as an investor. Most people, they buy and sell real estate. We as salespeople, we make money helping others buy or sell, but the best way to make money is to invest yourself and have real estate assets. And so there's opportunity for your clients, also for you, realtors in the Highland Lakes Association of Realtors, to see this coming up soon, because these arms are coming due. What you're saying is that they'll go from 3%, that locked in 3%,
to maybe up to 8%.
9, 10.
Yeah. And so that reset. So folks who are cash rich right now have an investment opportunity. But I think more importantly, if this, if this is part of what's actually happening, I had a group of realtors at the center a month or two ago, and we discussed this, is that a lot of investors had used 3-year and 5-year adjustable rate mortgages, and they mentioned it's summertime was when they like to time their purchases. So right now, you probably got a lot of folks, a lot of investors that are seeing higher insurance premiums and higher resetting rates. Those properties are going to turn negative cash flow. Well, that becomes an opportunity for a first-time home buyer. Now, there's going to need to be price adjustments because of obviously investor.
We're talking like more multifamily.
No, single family.
Single
family investments.
Okay.
Single family investors, right? The folks who during COVID went.
They bought up a lot.
I call them the weekend wealth builders that went to the seminar on the weekend. Okay, formed the corporation, the LLC. Got the financing.
And listen to Grant Cardone and Robert Kiyosaki.
Got the financing. Got the property management. Pick
Which
the
is not
property.
Bad, not bad strategy.
That helps facilitate the transaction, facilitates the investment. But when the financing is short term, like we were led to believe that short term rates would remain after COVID would remain low for a long period of time. Except so folks, if they could have at least gotten that first reset under their belt, they could hold it and continue hold that for a longer period of time.
But these folks can't.
It didn't turn out that way.
So there's opportunity out there.
There's opportunity,
opportunities and single family investment.
That's my hot tip: is to look through the tax rolls.
Well, the other pro tip was that you said summertime is when they reevaluate.
Summertime.
Is that because it's right before school starts?
Exactly. It's easier to lease up properties in the summertime, and so that's when they timed a lot of their purchases. And so, if that's the case, then probably it would make sense that a lot of extra inventory is hitting the market in the spring, with folks thinking, hey, this, the cash flow is going to be challenging going forward. So.
I appreciate you talking about that. Now we're going to go from micro to macro a little bit more. So I watched a 60 Minutes interview with Jerome Powell. He's the Fed chairman. And he's the one that with the committee, they determine the federal funds rate.
Correct.
Can you tell us what that is and how it affects realtors and where it comes from? A little bit of synopsis on what you did in our presentation today earlier.
Okay. So the Fed funds rate, federal funds rate, is the rate at which banks lend reserves to each other. Reserves are like cash for banks. And so back before Paul Volcker in 1979, banks would negotiate the rate that they would lend reserves to each other. When Paul Volcker came in and they needed to deal with inflation, the Federal Reserve took control of the Fed funds rate and raised it way up because so many borrowing rates are benchmarked off of Fed funds. Back when I was in the market and we were doing our lending to the big investment banks, quite often the loans were Fed funds plus
benchmarking. That's right. The bar is set right here, and then we're going to
here's
add
the base rate,
margin.
and we're going to add a 10 or 50
we got to make our own
basis
money,
point,
That's what
right,
we're
to earn a spread. And so so a lot of benchmark rates for businesses, working capital loans, payroll loans, a lot of short-term funding depends on rates that are influenced by the Fed funds rate. So when the Fed raises that rate, it raises the short-term borrowing rates for everybody in the economy, and that's how the Fed slows the economy. If you're one of those who managed to finance when the short-term rates were low, good on you, but you got a limited time period.
Right.
And so now with the inflation,
especially if you have an
adjustable rate mortgage, inflation wasn't a problem 3 years ago.
Right.
So somewhere between 3 years ago and now, inflation became a problem. So the Federal Reserve sought to slow the economy by making short-term financing more expensive. And so they've slowed the economy gradually.
Someone would say, why would they do that? Why would they want to slow the economy?
To stop inflation, to prevent inflation.
But if the economy is growing, wouldn't inflation not be a factor?
When the economy is growing because of great credit growth, strong credit growth, the only way to slow it down is to make credit more expensive. And so, I guess without going, we had a great discussion. We had a great discussion in the session, but when the supply of goods and services is now back to normal and not constrained, you're going to see inflation come down, like we've seen in the last couple of,
So right now, what is the federal funds rate?
Fed funds, I believe it's about 5 1/4. I haven't
5 1/4. So that doesn't mean that's your mortgage rate. That means that's the bar. And then the banks and lending organizations, they add their margin on it, their spread, if you will. And so tell me about how long has it been since they've made a move up or down? Because they've held it steady for a while. When's the last time they went up?
The last time that they made a major move was back in 2006. I think, or was it was 2005, 2006. They moved up, raised the Fed funds, I think it was about 420 basis points in about 25 months. This time the increase has been over 500 basis points in 18 months.
And you said you hadn't seen that since, that's normally, did you say something about wartime? When it came to
that's deficit spending. That's getting into federal deficit spending. We haven't seen that. But, getting back to the Fed funds rate and the importance of the Fed funds is it naturally slows economic activity, right? Business managers, funding for inventory loans, funding for payroll loans gets more expensive. So they want to do less than that. So that slows the economy.
So they're trying to manage inflation by keeping it the same because they're afraid that if they lower it,
Right.
people are going to go get a bunch of credit,
Go get
it
a
over
bunch
their
more
head,
loans.
and then they're going to crash the economy because they can't pay for the payments.
Well, no, they're going to get more loans, which then gives them more money to spend, and causes the price of goods to go up again because they can borrow more money at a lower rate.
So some would say the cost of goods is high right now, even though the rate is maintained and not been lowered, right? Because you were talking about discretional income and how with your mortgage increasing, that you have 30% less to spend.
Well, the purchasing power. When you take the mortgage rate from 2 3/4 or 3% like it was in 2020,
almost
and
free money.
you take it up to where it is right now at about it's over 6 3/4. The problem with the mortgage rate increasing that much is that purchasers lose they've lost over 30% of their purchasing power.
So not spending money on vacations and concerts and
Well,
T-shirts at George Strait concerts. Although it's interesting, though, think about this. We talked about doom spending. This was a term you brought up. How people are, doomsday. They think things are going to go to, hell in a handbasket in our country, and things are just going, going away. It's going to be terrible, and so they're pessimistic, and so they're like, I'm just going to spend money to make myself happy because it's the dopamine rush, right?
It's dealing with stress. It's a way of shopping is a way of dealing with stress.
I'm wondering about the statistics at the George Strait concert. How much did people spend on tickets, drinks, food, merchandise, right? And you think, where do these people get this money? If it's so bad, right? I mean, let's just look at things from that perspective. It's interesting where you have some pockets that are very dire and destitute, and then some you're going, how are these people doing this? Well, and you think there's a lot of, let me ask you this, you think there's a lot of cash out there that people are holding on to?
I think, what we've seen,
when it comes to real estate,
according to, let's start with consumption.
Okay.
So
sure.
According to the San Francisco Fed, I read a report that said all that excess savings ended in the third quarter of last year. I just heard somebody else mention the San Francisco Fed that said it ended in the first quarter of this year. So those excess savings that people had from all the stimulus money is gone. What we're seeing now is credit card debt at record levels. Okay, so there's a lot of folks who they're out of cash, but they're spending on credit cards. They're hitting that limit. And so we've kind of
they're partying like it's 1999.
And so you mentioned the doom spending, and it's particularly prevalent among Gen Z and millennials, but it's a way of folks to deal with stress, and so that's the difficult. Yeah. That's been fueling consumption and keeping the economy going, keeping consumption going.
Do you also find that demographic also rents more than it buys as far as real estate?
I haven't looked.
It's my theory. This is Butter's world here. That you're seeing more rentals, because I used to be in the tech space in Austin, and a lot of the folks that I worked with were younger than me. I'm 44, and so I'm technically Gen X. I think barely Gen X. But you get the millennials, whatever you want to call them, Gen Y, and what they like to do is they have to work hard and they have to play hard, and they don't necessarily want to deal with the maintenance and stress of a house and a yard. They want to be downtown Austin. They want to have the nice condo. They want to go out close to the bars and the restaurants, take the Ubers, do all the things. So they're spending their money not on a mortgage payment for a long-term investment, but for short-term fun, right? And short-term, like, hey, I'm in my 20s and 30s. I'm going to live it up. And so that's what I've seen. Okay. It's not always true. Obviously, if you look at, we don't have the statistics and all this to prove it. But that's just my theory. I didn't know if you had a thought of that.
Yeah, I do actually. So if you recall, or if anybody recalls, back in 2018, 2019, we were all lamenting the millennial renters, right? The folks who were in their early 30s, mid 30s, the millennials who were still renting. They were doing exactly what you just described. When the mortgage rates dropped down to 3% and 2 3/4%, it became that once in a lifetime opportunity for home ownership. And so what I started seeing at that point was a lot of stories about millennials purchasing their first home. Okay.
So it
That's
shifted.
so it pulled those millennials who would have probably purchased incrementally in the coming years. All of a sudden, that demand got pulled up into 2020 and 2021. And oh, by the way, we didn't have enough supply at that point.
So it drove
And
prices
so
up.
between millennials being able to get 30% more money on a mortgage loan and a shortage of supply of houses available, it created bidding wars. So all of that purchasing power got put into the home purchase and drove prices up so high. It was a combination of the influence on mortgage rates and bank lending. Banks were able to lend much more for the same amount, and millennials, renter millennials coming off the sidelines to purchase what limited supply was available was the perfect storm that gave us that huge price appreciation in 2020 and 2021.
That's good. That's good data. But that's your job. You're a data scientist.
Well, I did that study, and when you look at the major metros,
I love to see that report.
when you look at the major metros, the 4 major metros, the price appreciation in 2020 and 2021 was, when you look at the median price, was not far off of what the increase in purchasing power was in both of those years. So
what they could afford is what they actually bought.
Because of
In
the bidding
metros,
wars.
you mean DFW, Houston, Austin, San Antonio.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Correct. And so these bidding wars and the shortage of housing, and combined with banks being able to lend much more because they could afford it at the low mortgage rate, with that bidding war, it forced the buyers, the millennial renters, and anybody else wanting to buy their first home to bid all of that increased purchasing power. And that, I believe, is what drove home prices so far so fast.
You mean in the last, from like 2020
to 2022.
Okay. Because now I came in the market 2022. Let me tell you, folks, it was rough. It was rough because I didn't ride that wave. Right, I didn't get in when that was happening, but in some ways I'm thankful because I know it was heartbreaking to tell people they didn't get the bid because someone outbid and had a better offer, wrote a nice letter to them or whatever they did to get the deal when they were moving to Austin or whatever. So in some ways I'm glad. In some ways I'm like, man, I missed out making some money, right? But now we're kind of in a rebuilding season.
Well, now we're in the exact opposite, where prices are high, and your first-time home buyers cannot afford these prices with that reduction of purchasing power.
But here's the encouraging thing for me, because we're going to go the opposite way. We're going to look at baby boomers. Okay. We're talking about baby boomers, and you said 50% of boomers, and these are folks that are
the peak boomers.
The peak boomers.
The peak boomers. So a peak boomer was born between 1959 and 1964. Okay. So it's the last cohort.
Because the baby boom started in 46.
46.
Okay.
And so this is that last cohort that turns 65 between 2024 and 2029.
And so they primarily are living off 50% are living off of Social Security alone.
Well, no, they haven't retired yet.
They haven't retired yet.
But with the amount of savings they have, which is very, I think the median was $250,000 total retirement savings.
To last them possibly
30 years.
If they live to 95.
They are expecting or they're basically anticipating that Social Security is going to have to make up 40% replace 40% of their income. And so they're going to be, with the lack of resources, very heavily dependent on Social Security. So my question is, what is the real estate community, how are they going to, what kind of housing is going to be created for these folks to be able to afford at a low income a suitable retirement and have access to the services they need?
So in my mind, I'm thinking it's going to go back to like when they were first married. You get an apartment, then maybe a condo, then you maybe get a small house. Then when rates get better, you could do something else. But it's kind of a reverse situation, if you
Right.
will, life situation.
Downsizing.
As the Germans say, sits in Leben, your station in life,
Mm-hmm.
where they are in their life. And so where they are is, hey, I don't have very much money, and I don't want to put all my cash into a property right now. And I definitely don't want to get a 9% mortgage. What am I going to do? They're probably going to rent too. Maybe like some of those millennials. We're seeing a lot of apartments being built, townhomes. So folks that are not cash heavy or wealthy, even I don't know, middle of the road, the like upper middle income folks, they're trying to, because they may live long. Hey, my parents live a long time. They got great drugs. Nowadays, they can make me live a lot longer. How am I going to afford it? My dad is 67. My mom's about to be 65. She's retiring next year. And we had this conversation. I said, Mom, what are you making per year right now? So she told me the number. And I said, how much do you anticipate to get from retirement Social Security? And that number did not match what she was making because, it's not like she's been in this industry for 40 years. She's 23 years as a teacher. And so they're figuring out, like, what do we need to do? My dad's a realtor as well and a pastor. And so they've got different streams of income. But I feel like they're not alone. And
Definitely not alone.
And that peak boomer. Now, here's what I also, my theory is, the beginning of the boomers, the ones that are still alive from the 40s and early 50s, I feel like they have a lot of cash. And I think there's going to be a generational wealth transfer bigger than we've ever seen because and I'm not just talking about cash, I'm talking about properties and ranches, things that are going to be given over to kids that may not want to deal with it. What are your thoughts on those things?
I agree that wealth transfer can have. I mean, it's no question it's already impacting. It was part of the millennials purchasing their first home in 2020. Okay, one of the major sources of down payments was gifts from family. So that I think was really where the generational wealth transfer picked up, was from boomers to millennial children to purchase their first home. The thing that concerns me is the amount of assets that are about to come onto the market in that generational wealth transfer.
Because my friend who's a pastor has told me he's done more funerals this year in Horseshoe Bay alone than he's ever done in the first part of the year. In this area or other areas, you have people that are passing on, and when that happens, usually there's a house or a ranch or a secondary property that needs to be sold or it stays in the family. But sometimes people don't want to. Kids, grandkids, they don't want to keep it. They don't want to manage that, or the taxes around it.
And so that increases properties available for sale, which then increases inventory, which then puts downward pressure. But I think
prices lower
and prices come down. But I think to kind of turn around, one of the things that I've noticed, I spent almost 2 years full-timing in my RV, and I pay a lot of attention to RV parks and what's going on in that type of housing. But one thing I'm seeing is a lot of communities, RV resorts, putting in these tiny homes. They'll rent the space, and you'll have a small, very nice. They're very attractive, small.
There's two close to us, Firefly and Archery in Fredericksburg right now.
Right, and so when I look at peak boomers, and I'll look at this area here, and I see it would be a potential strategy to provide communities like that. I remember
investment strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, investment strategy. I remember even where I am up in where I grew up. So I grew up in Vancouver, and just over the border is Ferndale, Washington. And there are a number of these RV communities that have the park models or the tiny homes on them, and a lot of retired folks can live in those places. And they're very attractive, safe, clean.
They're nice.
Very beautiful. And so
I think mobile homes and mobile parks and RV parks get a bad rap because people are like, it's just, you have a lot of, poverty and crime, and there's a lot of issues. But I think you're seeing more of this 55 plus communities
Exactly.
popping up. And it
Exactly.
makes sense because they don't want to manage the square footage. They don't want to clean a 5,000 square foot house. They don't want to pay the taxes on a 5,000 square house, or they don't want to furnish it
Well,
because it costs money.
the folks in a 5,000 square foot house are
Or-
probably not going to be buying a
even
manufactured house.
2,500.
But if you are a retiree, a boomer that is constrained financially, then it becomes potentially an attractive alternative. And so
if you can handle living with your spouse in 400 square feet or less, that's the real question.
I just say go to Southern California and look at what they've done with those types of communities. But that's just something I share
No, that's
as
good. I'm
something
glad you
I've
brought that
seen
up.
as I travel around.
And as realtors, sometimes we get scared when we hear that because we're not buying a real house.
Well, they're not
or a
real.
lot.
It's not real property.
It's not real property,
Right.
I mean, it's technically has to be under 400 square feet to be considered recreational vehicle.
Right.
And so people are buying that with cash.
And attached to the ground to be real property, which
Right.
is critical for realtors to sell real property, not personal property.
Right.
So I think it's, there's a potential market there. How and who addresses it? Stick built on in a small house, or some other solution. I think it's a tremendous opportunity and something that I hope folks in this area will look at because of the affordability. It provides another alternative for folks who are financially constrained to migrate to the area.
Well, I think that other people, there's 2 points of view here. Either you can get real negative and pessimistic, the world is ending, Chicken Little model, or you can be the opportunist. And you say, when everybody's panicking, that's when I'm going to buy. When everybody's buying, I may be panicking. It's like I think that the smart people know that they're going to buy when things are low, when everybody's selling, and so that's you have to look at how intelligent investors think about the opportunities, because the realtors we shouldn't panic. We should be available for the opportunities to help our clients. And remember, this is about more than anything. It's about not just earning an income as a realtor. It's about helping people. We want to help people find that home that they love, second home, first home, that property. And we want to make sure that we use our resources, the Highland Lakes Association of Realtors, the Texas A&M Research Center. We want to use every resource available to us, every data, statistic, things that we can use to help them get into the right place.
It's problem solving.
Problem solving.
Simple as that. Problem solving for housing. And so the creative folks, the creative realtors who are good problem solvers, are going to find opportunity up, down, sideways, whatever market. You need to be a problem solver. So
and like we said earlier, before we started this podcast, people were buying and selling homes in the Great Depression. And there was a realtor out there or someone helping them find a place. The good ones know how to keep helping others and selling homes even in down markets.
And even in inflation. Builders were still building in inflation. They were just building a little smaller.
Building smaller lots, smaller homes.
And so, the market still went on.
Well, thank you for being here today. Thank you for all that you do at the Research Center, helping us realtors do our best to help our clients and to work harmoniously together so there's a win-win situation for everyone.
Yeah.
Any last words or thoughts, Joe?
I thoroughly enjoyed being up here with the Highland Lakes folks. Just my compliments to the board and to the members and their great attention and intelligence. So,
well, thank you for sharing. Thank you to our board and everyone who supports us. Make sure you like and subscribe our podcast, Waves Podcast. And my name is Matthew Butter. It's been a pleasure to be your host today. Thank you, Gerald Klassen, for being here. Y'all have a wonderful week. Talk to you soon.